For today's story, I want to share a very impactful and valuable conversation that I had in the YouTube comments section. If you follow the podcast on YouTube, there's one video that's become significantly more popular than every other episode, every other breakout video that we've produced, and that's going to be me reacting to the call that I made to the Dave Ramsey Show on November 2nd. And if you're listening to audio only, I'm going to paraphrase the initial comment that started this conversation and share the highlights that inspired the main topic. This particular comment basically started by laying out that Dave Ramsey and I use different sets of assumptions when it comes to our retirement modeling. And if we apply our respective assumptions, we get our own respective answers. So it's not that either one of us is bad at math. It's just we're solving problems with different assumptions.
And they're not using good sets of assumptions.
And I love this point that our assumptions were different, and that's why our results were different. The assumptions that go into the retirement modeling to come up with retirement strategies and retirement education truly do matter. So I responded, "You are a nerd after my own heart. Thank you for the comment." I would say the issue at play is the part you mentioned at the end. Dave assumes no volatility in his model, which yields a result that does not reflect reality. The study results should provide more realistic risks that we can use to understand potential and relative risk exposure given different approaches. I would and do argue that 8% safe withdrawal rates will expose almost anyone to undue risk when applied with the constant dollar method over an average retirement, assuming regular rebalancing and the like. I ran my own simulations as well, so I could best understand all of this. I posted that in episode number 36. I think you will like that one a lot. It is a lot of numbers, but the results for my set of assumptions are pretty cool. While I think episode 36 is genuinely helpful for everyone, it does really get into the weeds of a significant number of numbers. I'm not going to read all of this response verbatim from Mathematician 1234, but I am going to read the bulk of it. Oh yes, I am a nerd. Thank you. Yes, understanding the risk is important for all of us. Once the market risk is injected into the simulation, it produces sequence of returns risk, and that has the potential to be the killer of hopes and dreams. I think this is interesting since Dave Ramsey's big reason for using 8% safe withdrawal rates in his answers on the radio is to avoid hope stealing or killing hope. Moving on, this is the part of the conversation that inspired the main topic. An extra level of Monte Carlo modeling would be to allow for time-varying inflation. I have not done that yet. I am not sure how the random variables driving inflation and stock returns are correlated. That's a big deal. I could look that up and model it. It might help, or hurt, or be neutral. Best wishes and wishing you many happy returns. Okay, and this is something that while I've thought about, I did not necessarily apply in my initial retirement study, taking into account time-varied inflation. If the varied return of the securities you're invested in, be them equities, bonds, or whatever, goes up and down with time, and there's sequence of returns risk, well, certainly inflation has a sequence risk tied to it. And there may be a correlation under the efficient market hypothesis that when inflation is going up, returns may also follow and in some way act as a hedge against inflation, depending on what you're invested in. In other words, what you're invested in for your retirement has varying sensitivity to inflation and may be directly or inversely correlated to the changing inflation month to month. And there can also be a delay from inflation changing and then the investments reacting. And this got me thinking that modeling time-varied inflation relative to the historical data that I used for my study in episode 36 would be a good idea. So I responded, perhaps this is something you might enjoy playing with. You could simply use an inflation-adjusted return for the portfolio in question. The distribution wouldn't need to be modified year after year in that case, as growth is already converted into today's money. Do you think that would work? Also, in my work, I have distributions taken out at the monthly level to make the work more reflective of reality. I cannot practically imagine only taking out one withdrawal from the nest egg every year. I found that my numbers deviated in a hopeful manner from the studies ran with annual distributions assumed for simplicity. Keep being awesome. Mathematician1234 responded one more time in this conversation saying, "Interesting. Although I could use inflation adjusted returns and then not need to modify the withdraw for inflation, I think it makes it more difficult to explain to others. For example, if I do this in a spreadsheet and show it to my English major wife, she is not going to get it. It's just too clever. Yes, monthly rather than annual distributions will have some impact. That's certainly a more realistic approach. If it is a monthly instead of a beginning of year lump sum, then I think you will find you have a little more money invested during the year and a slightly better outcome. If it is monthly instead of an end year lump sum, then I think you will find you have a little less money invested during the year and slightly worse outcome. Your monthly simulation outcome is probably close to the average of the beginning and the end lump sum outcomes. I'm looking for a ballpark indication, so I will just likely stick to the annual for simplicity. And I respect that. We can definitely hit a point of diminishing returns by getting too detailed with our modeling for retirement. But I think there is, for me, for what I want to share with you, enough of a difference between annual and monthly modeling that it will impact the education that you take away from my work. And this conversation really got me wondering, is time varied inflation, actual historical inflation data, going to impact the results that I had shared with you back in episode 36? So much so that it would make a difference for your understanding of retirement. So over the last month, I have worked on rerunning my retirement modeling using the same set of historical data, but this time, instead of using a flat rate for assumed inflation raises year after year, I used historical inflation data. And I'm going to share those results with you now in today's main topic.